Yeah, first of all, just one more remark to Matan's talk. So we are, in fact, with Gnosis, we are working in different capacities together with DAOstack. And one thing I want to encourage everyone to try out. So we just a few days ago released this Dutch exchange, kind of this autonomous exchange, and that one will be governed by a DAOstack DAO. So, well, there will be very soon very concrete opportunity to try out all that stuff. Anyways, my talk now will be kind of still about the one alternative mechanism that tries to reach the same goal, scalable governance. And yeah, it is, as Matan already also mentioned, the word Futarchy. So using prediction markets, just prediction markets, to make decisions. And kind of the radical or the promise in my view, or the very high level promise, and then I will go into details, is that with voting systems you still have a closed group, and it's not necessarily clear that those who have the voting rights or the reputation or the tokens, that those are kind of that there isn't knowledge outside of that group that shouldn't be important, and that should be incorporated in the decision process. And in contrast with Futarchy, it's totally open, so everyone who thinks can contribute to this decision, well, can actually contribute. And well, the big idea is that there are measures in place that it's still resilient. But I will go into it. At least if I can go to the next slide. It's not working. Can I do anything? Oh, here we go. So I somehow assume people know what a prediction market is, but just kind of to summarize our perspective. So you need an unambiguous, publicly known event. The outcome, or upfront, you need to cover all possible outcomes. Eventually, you need an oracle that kind of describes what outcome happened, and then you can make a payout, and you finally need a currency, or what we call in our wording a collateral token. So again, you have this collateral token. You define an event with all the possible outcomes. In this case, 3, and you define an oracle. And then it's just a very, very simple tool, and we have an EIP for that in the making, that you put in this collateral token, or anyone could at any time put in one collateral token and create 3 of those, or depending on how many outcomes there are, potential outcomes, 3 of those outcome tokens. And eventually, and at any time you can create those outcome tokens, a full set of outcome tokens for a collateral token, and at any time you can go back, you can take a full set of outcome tokens and convert it back to the collateral token. But when eventually the outcome is resolved and the oracle says which outcome happened, well, then you can redeem just the winning outcome for the collateral token. So again, that means if you trade those outcome tokens and you trade them on a market, and you assume the outcome A happens with the likelihood of, let's say, 30%. Well, the price you should be willing to pay for that is 30% of the collateral token. And if it's trading at 0.25, you have a clear incentive to buy it all the way up to the price of 0.3, because there is an expected profit. And that's just a very, very simple concept of the prediction market. So again, you have a market creation phase where you define those stuff. You have the trading phase, and you can all invited to try that out. You have your cards preloaded with Oli, where you can try them out in the prediction market. So that all works today, and eventually the market is resolved and paid out. I also skip this slide. So now, that's kind of the general concept of a prediction market. And now I want to hint you to some observation. For the general concept of a prediction market, it is important that the collateral token, so the currency you're using, is in a way independent of the event you're predicting. So it doesn't make any sense to make a prediction with Ether, will the price of Ether drop close to 0? Because if I would, well, I mean, it's obvious, I would never place Ether in this prediction and bet on yes, because, well, even if I win, I lost. And the same thing is, if I would use DAI to predict whether the DAI mechanism will fail, well, it wouldn't make sense to me to. And then you could even go so far, if there was a prediction, will the Earth hit by a meteorite and kind of everything is destroyed? Well, yeah, then I would put all my money on no, because in the case of yes, well, what is it worth to me? So what we see is, again, for the normal use case, the value of the collateral should be totally independent of the outcome, or the outcome or the event should not influence the value of the collateral. If your goal is to get kind of just the right prediction for the likelihood of that event. However, in Futarchy and in the conditional tokens, we are exactly using that relationship to kind of discover how events have an effect on the collateral token. And the interesting thing is that the collateral token can not just be a currency, but can be something that measures how close we are getting to a metric, or how close we are getting to a goal. But we'll go into that. So the simplest use case of that would be how we want to make use of that is we would take a token, the Gnosis token or some whatever token, and we could take the Gnosis token and we would ask the question, will Gnosis, the Gnosis platform, have a trading volume of more than whatever, 10 million in a year? So obviously that outcome, might have an effect on the token price or the collateral price. So what we get is, if we just apply the same principle, we can have a token under that condition, or kind of a future on this actually it is still a promise for the real token, so it's not just the future, but just under the condition that something else happens. And then you can discover just on the market, and you get an idea of how that event would impact the price. So one example where that could have been already quite useful was Brexit. Of course, you could have a market in pounds, so you could, before Brexit happens and independent whether or not Brexit happens, you can already see upfront before Brexit what is the value of the pound, or what will be the value of the pound, or how do the market evaluates the value of the pound under the condition Brexit and under the condition no Brexit. And again, people can make those trades independent, whether they don't need to have any opinion about whether or not the event will happen, whether or not Brexit will happen. They just have an opinion about what is the price of it if it happens. So they can have a position that if the event doesn't happen, they just get refunded, or they have no exposure. So that mechanism alone you can use to make, or those conditional tokens you can already use to reduce your risk, basically. So today, if you buy a token, or I would use the same thing for stocks. If you buy one stock, you're effectively doing a lot of predictions in a way. So you're assuming this will happen, or a bunch of things need to come together to make that a good investment. But maybe you don't want to kind of buy into this full set of assumptions or predictions. You just want to say, well, I know this. I know this relationship. I know that if the team achieves to kind of actually build it, the project will be very successful, but I have no idea about whether the team is actually capable. So I think it's a good idea, but I have no opinion about the team. And then someone else could have different knowledge to say, yeah, it's a good team, but I don't know if the idea is good. So you can make with those conditional tokens very specific bets. And now we go even a step further and ask, how can we use this this concept of conditional tokens to, well, actually make decisions. So far we were just like observing if something happens, what will be the value, and now we are using this mechanism to say, well, to actually make the decision of what will happen. So we are looking at the prices of how will the decision or the event affect the future, and depending on how it will affect the future, depending on that, we do make that decision. So the first, the most critical part is to actually define a metric. So what you need always for Futarchy is a metric. What do you want to optimize for? And in a case like a publicly traded company, that might be simple. You say, well, it should just be the share price. But I would argue, I would argue it's quite a hard problem. So if you would say for Ethereum, we want to have kind of we might want to have an on-chain governance process. It would be very far from obvious to me what is the objective metric for Ethereum governance. So what is the goal of Ethereum governance? And I think that is a very hard question, and Futarchy forces you to answer that question. Just to give a few examples, if you would just say, well, the goal of Ethereum is to increase the value of Ether. Well, you could make a very simple proposal that does that. You would just propose to to burn half of all Ether, force it in all accounts. Well, then maybe you would double the value per Ether. Whether that was, and it was certainly not a useful proposal. And then you could say, well, then just maximize the market cap. But even that, is that really the goal? And if you would say, then you make a proposal that you create new Ether and take some people out, then you might increase the market cap. But is that really the goal? Are there not a lot of other goals in there? So a lot of other goals that involve some sense of fairness, some sense of whatever. So I'm just saying the metric is really hard. But anyways, if we have a metric, and the slogan from Robin Hanson, who came up with that, was vote on your value. So the suggestion was here to vote on that metric, but then use the markets to figure out how to achieve this metric. So we need this metric, and then we create those conditional markets. So we're basically asking, what is the forecast for this metric under that condition, or what is the forecast, or under the assumption that we do this decision, or under the assumption that we do that decision. And we allow trading on those both markets, and eventually the system would automatically implement the decision with a higher forecast on the metric. So yeah, one standard example is the metric in this case could be just the value of the share price of the company, and the question could be, should we fire the CEO? Or actually, here's the quarterly revenue. Is here the metric that you want to optimize for? And yeah, you could again create those two markets, prediction markets. What's on the quarterly revenue under that condition? Under that condition, you allow trading. Eventually, the market shows, yeah, one decision would be better, and you implement that. So, in the context of blockchain governance, one of the promising parts about Futarchy is, again, what I said earlier, this complete openness. Anyone can participate, and the second part, it forces a discussion on explicit values. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, I do not even have necessarily an opinion about that. So, a little bit technical. Again, you have those that's kind of how we do it on smart contract level. We have those, on the very top, you have the collateral token that might be just something, a currency, Ether, DAI, whatever. And then you, in the first step, you create those tokens that represent the currency under the condition that that A or B happens, and then you're using that currency in a second market or in two markets that predict or are prediction markets on the metric, and you can go long or short on the metric. Yeah, a few ideas or a few things how we do it concretely. So the first step, in my opinion, would be, or is independent of Futarchy, just experiment with those conditional tokens. Just have markets on Ether under the condition that this happens, or GNO under the condition that that happens, or whatever. And the next part is, of course, the very hard or finding metrics, and a few suggestions or a few things how you can experiment in different DAOs that you could set up and experiment with Futarchy. So one DAO could be just a single event DAO. So in this case, the metric would just be whether a single event is happening or not. How do you do that? Well, you can, for example, create a prediction market. Will Ethereum switch to proof of stake by the end of whatever, 2019? Yes or no? And now the yes token here in this market is kind of a metric of how likely is that event to happen. And now you could do a Futarchy that optimizes, or the goal of that Futarchy is just to optimize the value of that yes token. Effectively, now this Futarchy is the only goal of that Futarchy is to make it more likely that that proof of stake will happen until the end of 2019. So you can kind of allocate budget to the thing, and the thing will just make proposals, and they will only be accepted if the market thinks that proposal has a positive impact on increasing the value of the token, which means making it more likely that this event will happen, proof of stake will be implemented. The second one would be a simple kind of hedge fund DAO, so that would be the same mechanism as the DAO back in the day. So a lot of people would put money in, everyone proportionally gets a token, and then you just do the prediction, or the metric you want to optimize is just the value of the token. So the DAO doesn't care about anything; it just cares about making money. The third suggestion would be a support DAO. So we as Gnosis could say, well, we have some resources, and part of it we want to allocate just to a DAO that supports Gnosis, for example, GNO price or other objectives we might have. And kind of we just give it to this DAO and just supports another objective. And the fourth proposal is this idea of that the objective is a sentiment. So again, I said earlier, it's quite hard to define an objective or a metric. But what you could do is you could give any participant in your system some voting rights, and at some point you could just ask them how happy are they, or kind of how happy are they with the decision process or with the state of the network or the DAO. And that is the metric. The metric is kind of the happiness or the sentiment of some population. And again, then the metric for the DAO would be the prediction on that. So you do this vote every year or something like that, and then eventually, so you have this prediction market on that vote, kind of how happy, or kind of what metric, something, for example, between 0 and 1, will be the outcome of the vote. And again, during the time, your decisions are made to optimize that metric. Concept we also have implemented, and there's currently a workshop going on in the build room, is using Futarchy for TCRs. So TCRs usually would use voting, but of course you can use Futarchy. And here the metric would just be optimizing the value of the TCR token. And that's something we have implemented and are also very close to trying it out. So yeah, timelines. I have to say I put a maybe behind it. I have been too often wrong with timelines. But yeah, we have, or basically this framework of creating those tokens that is ready, and we will polish it a bit more and make it very accessible for anyone to just try it out. Well, then we kind of really need to explain this concept and get people used to trade those conditional tokens, and then we can start experimenting with all the different possibilities we have. OK, thank you.